The mansion stood still in the silence that followed. A single gunshot had shattered the calm, but it was more than that, it had shattered an empire. Vincent the King Romano, leader of one of the world's most feared criminal syndicates, lay lifeless on the marble floor. His dark tailored suit now stained with his own blood, the room seemed to hold its breath. His hand, trembling with the last spark of life, reached out toward the phone on the ground. His fingers brushed it, the device's cold surface as lifeless as he was. The final message was typed with a shaking hand. "It's done. The king is dead." His breath hitched as the screen blinked, and the message was sent. His empire had crumbled, and with it, the world would never be the same. Outside, the storm raged as thunder cracked through the sky, but inside, all was eerily quiet. The question remained: who had orchestrated his demise? Was it revenge, or was this only the beginning of a darker, more calculated conspiracy? As the phone's glow dimmed, so too did Vincent's rule, but the true battle was yet to come. The wind howled through the mansion's cracked windows, echoing the turmoil in Alex's mind. It had all happened so fast. Vincent Romano, the ruthless Kingpin, was dead. In the blink of an eye, the empire that Alex had known for so long was no more. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Alex stood in the darkened room, the weight of what had transpired pressing heavily on their chest. The king's death was more than a tragedy. It was a symbol of the shifting tides in the underworld. The storm outside raged, but it mirrored the storm brewing within. There were no simple answers now. Who could be trusted? Who was behind Vincent's death? And most importantly, who would rise to take his place? Alex had worked for Vincent for years, blind to the dark truths lurking beneath the surface of the syndicate. Now, all of that was gone. The lines between loyalty and betrayal had blurred, and as Alex stood contemplating the future, one thought echoed louder than any other: the game was far from over. It had just begun. Alex stood motionless, staring out the shattered window, the storm outside mirroring the turmoil inside him. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his mind racing with questions. Who had pulled the trigger on Vincent? Who was behind this, and why? He had spent his life following Vincent's every command, but now he was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered empire. The underworld was a maze of secrets and lies, and Alex was caught in the middle of it, unsure of who could be trusted. But one thing was certain: Vincent's death was no random act. It was a calculated move. Someone had been waiting for this moment. The question now wasn't just who would take control, but who was orchestrating the entire game from the shadows. He had been loyal to Vincent for so long, but loyalty was a currency that had lost its value in the wake of betrayal. Alex turned away from the window and glanced over at the remnants of the mansion, the empty walls now echoing the absence of their former ruler. What was left of the empire? What was left of him? The door to Vincent's office creaked open, and in walked Olivia, one of Vincent's most trusted lieutenants. She stood tall, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She had been by Vincent's side for years, but now she was just another face in the shifting tide of power. "Alex," she said softly, her voice steady but betraying a hint of unease. "You're still here." There was no warmth in her tone, only the cold practicality that came with living in the world of crime. Alex turned toward her, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. "I was just thinking," he muttered, his voice rough. "Thinking about what comes next." Olivia stepped further into the room, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "What comes next is survival. We don't have the luxury of waiting around for answers," she said firmly. "We need to act, or we'll all be swallowed up by the chaos." Alex's gaze locked onto hers. He knew she was right. The empire had crumbled, but the underworld had a way of always finding a new leader, a new power. And if he didn't take control now, he would be left behind. The question wasn't whether they would survive, it was who would emerge victorious from the wreckage. Alex's eyes followed Olivia as she moved toward the desk, her heels echoing in the otherwise quiet room. She was right. There was no time for grief, no time for hesitation. The underworld had its rules, And the game didn't stop for anyone. Olivia was already making plans, already thinking about the next move. Alex, however, was still haunted by Vincent's death. He couldn't just move on, not yet. There had to be a reason, a purpose behind it all. But before he could voice his thoughts, Olivia interrupted. "We've been given an opportunity," she said, her voice sharp. "Our vacuum has opened, and it's ours for the taking. But we need to act fast, or others will move in." Alex met her gaze. He didn't trust her completely, but he knew she was right. The Empire was gone, but the pieces were still there, scattered across the underworld. The question now was who would pick them up and use them. "What's your plan?" Alex asked, his voice calm but determined. Olivia smiled, her eyes gleaming with ambition. "It's simple," she replied, her voice low. "We take what's ours, and we don't let anyone stand in our way." The underworld was a place of secrets, shadows, and betrayal. In the weeks following Vincent's death, the factions of the syndicate began to turn on each other. But in the midst of it all, Alex knew one thing: nothing had changed. The same game was being played, but now it was his turn to make the moves. Olivia had been swift, taking control of Vincent's operations with a ruthless efficiency, yet Alex knew her ambition would ultimately drive her to make mistakes. The Empire was crumbling, but it wasn't over yet. Power was still up for grabs, and there were those who would fight to the death for it. Alex had to tread carefully. He wasn't ready to expose his hand, but neither could he sit idly by while others took what was rightfully his. The battle for the throne was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming the legacy Vincent had built. But with every step, Alex could feel the walls closing in. Trust was a luxury he could no longer afford, not in a world where loyalty was as fragile as glass. As his mind raced through the possibilities, one thing became clear. The war for power had just begun. Olivia had always been a woman of calculated moves. But now, Alex was beginning to see the cracks in her armor. She may have taken control of the operations, but power in the underworld was never about what you could see. It was about what you could keep hidden. Alex had learned this the hard way, and now it was time to turn the tables. He met with his old contacts, ones who had been loyal to Vincent, knowing they were the only ones who could help him navigate the labyrinth of lies that now ruled the city. But even as he made his moves, he couldn't shake the feeling that Olivia was always one step ahead. She had a sharp mind, a hunger for power, but Alex wasn't about to let her consume what was rightfully his. He was determined to rebuild what Vincent had lost, piece by piece, and to do that, he needed to win the trust of those who had once followed Vincent's lead. The underworld wasn't kind to those who showed weakness, and Alex knew better than to let his guard down. The battle for control was heating up, and it was only a matter of time before the first betrayal would be revealed. As Alex sat in the dimly lit meeting room, the weight of the decisions to come pressed down on him. The flickering light overhead did little to calm his nerves. Olivia's power grab was not without its consequences. The other syndicates were watching, waiting for the first sign of weakness. Alex had no choice but to act swiftly. He reached out to an old rival, a former member of Vincent's inner circle, who had been cast aside after the last war for dominance. This man knew the ins and outs of the syndicate's operations, and could be the key to finding out where Olivia was vulnerable. Alex knew he was risking everything by trusting him, but the risks were worth it. If he could uncover Olivia's plans, he could dismantle her empire from the inside. The problem was that the lines between friend and enemy were blurring. Every move Alex made felt like a dance with the devil. But there was no turning back now. He had already chosen his path, and it was one that would lead him deeper into the heart of the underworld. The question remained: could he trust anyone, or was he doomed to repeat the same mistakes as Vincent? Alex's meeting with the former ally went as expected, full of tension and guarded promises. But as the hours passed, it became clear that Olivia was tightening her grip on the city. Rumors swirled that she was making deals with other syndicates, forming new alliances to solidify her control. Alex wasn't foolish enough to think she would play fair. Power, in the underworld, was always about who could manipulate the strings behind the scenes. But Alex wasn't one to sit idly by while others took the reins. He was going to act. With the information he had gathered, he began making his own moves, reassembling his old network of loyalists and operatives. Slowly but surely, he was building his army, one piece at a time. The next step was clear. He needed to show Olivia that she couldn't control everything. The underworld was in turmoil, and Alex intended to be the one who emerged victorious from the chaos. But he also knew that, sooner or later, he would have to confront Olivia face to face. It was the only way to settle the score. As the days passed, Alex's plans took shape. He had reached out to every contact he could trust, every loyalist who had once fought by Vincent's side. Slowly, his network began to grow, and the whispers of his return spread through the underworld like wildfire. Olivia may have been in control, but Alex was building an empire of his own, one that was grounded in loyalty, not fear. He was careful, patient, and always one step ahead, but he knew he couldn't stay in the shadows forever. Eventually, he would have to face Olivia head-on. The time for games was over. The underworld wasn't kind to those who hesitated. Alex had learned that lesson well. He had to make a choice: act now and risk everything, or wait and watch as Olivia solidified her power. There was no easy way out. He had already chosen his path, and the only thing left to do was walk it. As the power struggle deepened, Alex found himself in a precarious position. Olivia's alliances were growing stronger, and whispers of her control were beginning to spread throughout the city. For the first time since Vincent's death, Alex felt a sense of urgency that was impossible to ignore. The city was becoming a powder keg, and it was only a matter of time before the first spark ignited the chaos. Alex had spent the last few weeks carefully rebuilding his network, but now he needed to act swiftly before Olivia cemented her dominance. He wasn't just fighting for power. He was fighting to reclaim his legacy, the one Vincent had left behind. As he walked through the alleyways of the city, his thoughts were filled with the faces of those who had once called him a friend, now scattered in the winds of betrayal. With every step, Alex felt the weight of his decisions, knowing that each choice would bring him closer to a confrontation with Olivia. She may have made the first move, but Alex wasn't going to let her control the game. The time for shadows was over. He needed to make his move, or risk losing everything. Alex's meeting with Marco, an old confidant who had once been part of Vincent's inner circle, was tense. Marco had his own plans, his own ambitions. But Alex was determined to get the information he needed, even if it meant playing Marco's game. They sat across from each other in a dimly lit, abandoned warehouse, the air thick with the smell of mildew and dust. Marco leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table as he studied Alex. "You think you can take her down, don't you?" Marco asked, his voice low and guarded. Alex didn't flinch. "I think I have to." Marco smiled slightly, as if testing Alex's resolve. "Olivia's not like Vincent. She doesn't play by the same rules. She'll crush you if you're not careful." Alex nodded, understanding the weight of the warning. But he wasn't afraid of Olivia. He was afraid of losing everything Vincent had built. The Syndicate wasn't just a criminal empire, it was a family, and Alex was determined to protect that legacy no matter the cost. As the conversation continued, Marco's words hung in the air like a warning, but Alex was already thinking 2 steps ahead. The game was on. As Alex left the warehouse, the weight of Marco's warning lingered in his mind. Olivia was a dangerous player, and Alex could no longer afford to underestimate her. But there was something Marco had said that Alex couldn't shake: "She'll crush you if you're not careful." It was a subtle threat, but it was enough to make Alex question his next move. He had always been a man of action, a man who moved quickly and decisively. But now, the stakes were higher than ever, and every decision could be his last. Olivia had a network of allies, and she was ruthless when it came to keeping her power. Alex knew that if he was going to win, he had to be smarter, more strategic. The next step was to infiltrate Olivia's inner circle, to plant a seed of doubt before she could fortify her position. But as the days passed, Alex realized the full extent of the war he had entered. It wasn't just about power. It was about loyalty, survival, and the choices that would define his future. There was no going back now. The fight had begun, and only one side would emerge victorious. Alex spent the next few days gathering intel, carefully monitoring Olivia's movements and the people she surrounded herself with. But even as he grew closer to uncovering her secrets, the pressure was mounting. The city was beginning to feel like a powder keg, and every move Alex made could be the spark that ignited the chaos. One night, as he sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, his phone buzzed. It was a message from one of his most trusted allies. "Olivia's making her move. You're running out of time." The message was clear. Alex had to act now or risk losing everything. His mind raced as he considered his options. He couldn't afford to be passive any longer. The game had shifted, and the only way to win was to take control of the board. As he stared out the window at the city below, Alex knew that the time for waiting was over. He had to confront Olivia, and he had to do it now. The stakes were higher than ever, and the consequences of failure were deadly. The time had come. Alex knew that confronting Olivia would be no easy task. But he couldn't back down, not now. He had spent too long in the shadows, watching as she took control of Vincent's empire. It was his turn to strike. The final meeting was set. A neutral location, away from the eyes of their respective allies. But even as Alex prepared for the confrontation, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap. Olivia had been planning this for months, and he knew she wouldn't hesitate to eliminate him if given the chance. Still, he had no choice. The city was on the brink of collapse, and the only way to restore balance was to take Olivia down. The meeting would be a test of strength, of wills, and Alex was determined to come out on top. But as the night approached, doubt crept in. Was this really the right move? Or had he already lost the game before it had even begun? The battle for control had reached a boiling point. Alex had spent days strategizing, carefully positioning himself and his allies for the final confrontation with Olivia. But Olivia wasn't just a rival, she was a force. Her ruthless tactics were working, and she had cemented her power in the underworld. Every day, Alex felt the walls closing in. He knew he couldn't let her maintain her grip on the syndicate, but making the first move would be a dangerous gamble. The city's underworld had already shifted, and every faction now eyed each other warily, ready for the slightest provocation. But Alex wasn't afraid. He had to act, and fast. The time had come to take the fight to Olivia. No more subtle moves or behind-the-scenes plotting. This would be an all-out war. If he lost, it would cost him everything, but if he won, he would finally take back what was his, Vincent's legacy. Alex's plans were set in motion. He met with his most trusted operatives in a rundown warehouse, away from the prying eyes of Olivia's spies. "This is the moment we've all been waiting for," Alex said, his voice steady. "We're not backing down now." His words were met with silent nods. His allies, all seasoned criminals, understood the stakes. Olivia had grown complacent, thinking she controlled everything. But Alex had intel that she hadn't anticipated. The time to strike was now. They would take down her strongholds one by one, destabilizing her empire. It wasn't just about eliminating her resources. It was about sending a message. The underworld would no longer bow to her. Alex wasn't just fighting for power. He was fighting for revenge for the empire Vincent had built. The wheels were already turning, and there was no turning back. As the first attack unfolded, Alex's heart raced with anticipation. His team had hit one of Olivia's smaller operations, a warehouse filled with contraband goods. It was a message to her: no part of her empire was safe. But as the action unfolded, Alex felt a shift in the air. They had walked into an ambush. Olivia had expected this, and she was prepared. Gunfire rang out as Alex ducked behind cover, his mind racing. They had underestimated her. Olivia had anticipated every move. What was meant to be a quick strike had now turned into a bloody standoff. His allies fought fiercely, but they were outnumbered. The danger was real now. Olivia wasn't just playing for control. She was playing for survival. This wasn't just a battle for power. It was a fight for life. The ambush left Alex shaken but resolute. They had lost some men, but they had also made a statement. Olivia was no longer untouchable. As he sat in the aftermath, bloodied but alive, Alex knew this war was far from over. He had underestimated Olivia's resilience, but now he understood the stakes. The fight was escalating, and with each passing moment, the lines between enemies and allies were becoming blurrier. Alex had no choice but to keep pushing forward. His next move was crucial. He needed to take Olivia's strongest ally, someone she trusted completely, and turn them to his side. The game had changed, and Alex knew that only by shifting the balance of power could he truly challenge Olivia. But the path forward was riddled with uncertainty. There was no clear victory in sight, only the promise of more bloodshed. The city was on the brink of collapse, and Alex was standing on the edge, ready to make his final play. The final confrontation was inevitable. Alex knew it was time to face Olivia once and for all. He had gathered his forces, and Olivia had done the same. The city's criminal underworld was on the brink of total war, and neither side could afford to lose. The meeting point was set, a secluded mansion, hidden away from the prying eyes of the law. As Alex arrived, his heart pounded. This was the moment that would decide everything. But as he walked into the mansion, he was met not by Olivia, but by someone far more unexpected, one of his most trusted allies, the betrayer. The twist was undeniable. His closest confidant had been playing both sides all along. Alex's entire world came crashing down as the truth was revealed. Betrayal had always been the weapon of choice in this game, and Alex had just become its victim. Now, the final battle would not just be for power, but for survival. His empire was in ruins, and the only thing left was the fight for his life. Alex stood at the edge of the precipice, staring into the abyss. Olivia's betrayal cut deep, but the truth was undeniable. His closest ally, the one he'd trusted above all others, had turned against him. In a world built on lies, trust was the rarest currency, and Alex had paid the price. The realization hit hard. He was no longer just fighting for control, he was fighting to stay alive. The revelation was like a blow to the chest, but Alex's resolve only hardened. Olivia's power was now complete, but Alex wasn't out of the game yet. There was still a chance, and he would take it. He had no other choice. His allies were fewer now, but the few he had left were loyal. The war for the syndicate wasn't over. Olivia's empire had its cracks, and Alex intended to exploit them. The next move was crucial. One wrong step, and he would lose everything. But Alex wasn't a man who gave up. He was ready to face whatever came next, even if it meant facing down the one person he had once trusted more than anyone. With the world closing in, Alex's next move was critical. He gathered his remaining forces, the loyal few who hadn't turned on him. "We have to hit Olivia where it hurts," Alex said, his voice firm, yet filled with the weight of betrayal. His plan wasn't just about taking down Olivia. It was about dismantling everything she had built, piece by piece. The city was in chaos, and Alex saw an opportunity. He had intel that would cripple her finances, cutting off her lifeline. Her allies were beginning to question her, and Alex was ready to exploit that doubt. The war had reached its final stages, and every move now had to be decisive. He couldn't afford any more mistakes. But with every strike, the enemy grew more ruthless. Olivia wasn't just a target, she was a force that would stop at nothing to maintain control. This battle would be fought with blood, but Alex was prepared to pay the price. The final confrontation was coming, and only one of them would walk away. The first strike hit hard. Alex's men moved swiftly, disabling Olivia's financial operations without warning. Her empire began to fracture, the weight of each blow shattering the illusion of invincibility she had built. But Olivia wasn't weak, she retaliated with a viciousness Alex hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about power anymore, it was about survival. The war escalated quickly, with both sides suffering casualties. Every victory Alex claimed was met with a brutal counterattack. The city's streets became battlegrounds, filled with the sounds of gunfire and explosions. As the fight wore on, Alex realized the cost of war. The people he trusted were disappearing, swallowed up by the chaos. But there was no turning back. The endgame had begun, and the only way out was to outlast Olivia and her empire. Time was running out, and Alex knew that only one of them could emerge victorious. The final battle approached, and Alex knew there was no more room for hesitation. Olivia had taken everything he cared about, and now it was time for payback. His plan was set in motion, and there was no turning back. The night of the final confrontation was tense, with both sides on high alert. Alex and his team moved toward Olivia's compound, knowing that the outcome would decide the fate of the syndicate. As they closed in on their target, Alex's mind raced. Every part of him knew that this moment would define him. Olivia would be there waiting. But Alex wasn't afraid. The game had been rigged from the start, and now it was time to take control. His thoughts lingered on the cost of everything that had led up to this moment. The sacrifices, the betrayals, the bloodshed. But there was no more time for reflection. Only action. The war had reached its climax, and Alex was ready for the final showdown. The confrontation was nothing short of explosive. Gunfire echoed through the compound as Alex and Olivia faced each other. "You never understood the game, Alex," Olivia sneered, her eyes filled with contempt. "You were always just a pawn." Alex, bloodied but unbowed, replied, "I'm not a pawn anymore." With a final brutal exchange of fire, Olivia's empire came crashing down. In the end, Alex stood victorious, but at a cost. The price of power had taken its toll, and the world that remained was a hollow shell of what it had been. As Alex surveyed the destruction around him, he realized that victory meant little when everything had been lost in the process. He had won, but the consequences of his actions would haunt him for the rest of his life. There was no redemption, only survival. The aftermath of Olivia's defeat was bitter. Alex stood among the ruins of the once glorious syndicate, his victory feeling hollow. The empire was broken, but the cost had been immense. Every step he took had led to this moment, but with it came a crushing emptiness. He had taken back control, but the weight of the bodies left behind was heavier than any crown. The city, once vibrant, now felt cold and lifeless. It was a city of ghosts, of alliances broken and promises shattered. Alex looked around at the destruction, the empty streets, the silent buildings, and he realized that no matter how many victories he had claimed, he was left alone in the dark. The syndicate had consumed him, and in the end, there was nothing left to salvage. His reflection in a shattered window showed a man hollowed by the war, forever scarred. The battle was over, but Alex was still trapped in the wreckage of his own making. As Alex walked through the empty streets, the silence was suffocating. The city had once thrived under the control of his syndicate, but now it felt like a tomb. He had built this empire on blood and trust, but now all that was left were the ghosts of his past. Each step was a reminder of the cost: friends, allies, even family, lost along the way. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became. Victory meant nothing without something to hold on to. As he passed abandoned buildings and broken streetlights, Alex realized that the city had once been a symbol of his ambition, but now it was just a shell. The power he had fought for seemed trivial in the face of the destruction. He had achieved everything, but at what cost? The power he held had only served to isolate him further. With every step, Alex felt the weight of his choices, knowing there was no going back. Alex's phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from one of the few remaining allies he trusted. "We need to talk. This isn't over." The words felt like a punch to the gut. He had hoped for some respite, some time to recover from the destruction, but the war for power was never truly finished. As much as Alex wanted to walk away, to let the remnants of the empire fade into nothingness, he knew better. The underworld would never stop. It was a machine built on ambition, and as long as he was alive, he would be a part of it. There was no peace in this life, no happy ending. Alex understood that now. The choices he had made had sealed his fate, and no matter how many battles he won, he would never escape the consequences. The question wasn't whether he could rebuild, it was whether he even wanted to. The message had set everything in motion. Alex met his ally in a small, secluded cafe, far from prying eyes. "What do you mean, it's not over?" Alex asked, his voice low and steady. The man across from him leaned forward, his expression grim. "You think you can just walk away after all this? There are bigger players, and they're coming for what's left." Alex's heart sank. He had thought that with Olivia gone, he could take control and live without looking over his shoulder. But the game had changed, and new threats had emerged. The syndicate was only a piece of a much larger puzzle, and Alex realized he was no longer just fighting for survival. He was fighting for his life. The weight of it all hit him harder than ever. He had won, but there was always someone more powerful, more ruthless. The fight was never truly over. The final realization hit Alex hard. He couldn't escape the life he had built. The underworld was a beast that devoured those who tried to leave. Alex had played the game, and now it was too late to walk away. He had sacrificed everything, his allies, his soul. And for what? A few fleeting moments of power. As the sun set on the ruined city, Alex made his decision. There was no going back. He would rebuild, but it would be on his own terms. The cost of survival was high, but he had no other choice. He had learned the hard way that in this world, redemption wasn't an option. The only thing that mattered was whether he could keep fighting, keep surviving. And as the city darkened around him, Alex understood that the war would never end. It would simply shift. There would always be someone else to fight, always another battle to face. But at least he would be the one to decide when the fight was over. Alex walked through the ruined city, victory feeling hollow. The syndicate was shattered, and he was left with nothing. The underworld had consumed him, and now nothing mattered. The cost of survival was too high. There was no redemption, only loneliness and emptiness. Standing before the mansion's wreckage, Alex realized everything he fought for was gone. Olivia's defeat left him with nothing, no allies, no empire. Victory was now just a reminder of what he lost. He'd won the game, but at the cost of his soul. A phone call pulled Alex back from his thoughts. "It's not over," the voice warned. The underworld still had its grip on him. Even after Olivia's fall, the game never ends. Alex was left with no choice but to keep surviving, trapped in the cycle of betrayal and power. The warning echoed in Alex's mind. His ally had reminded him, the underworld never truly lets go. The empire was gone, but survival continued. The city, once his, was now a reminder of his choices. He had won, but was left with nothing. The game had shifted, but Alex was still part of it. Walking through the quiet streets, Alex felt the weight of his past. The city around him no longer mattered. He had fought, survived, but at what cost? The question lingered as he disappeared into the night, his footsteps the only sound in the silence.